What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to The Nerdy Narrative. Today, what we're going to do is just take a look back at 2022. I've got a list of questions here, so it's sort of like a book tag, but really it's just a guide for me to talk about some of the memorable reading moments from the past year. In 2022, I managed to read 184 books, which totaled up to 58,852 pages. There are a few mangas in there. I do include everything that I read throughout the year. So there are 25 to 30 mangas as part of that number. So if you want to get nitty gritty about it, I did read about 150 actual books, which is the goal that I had set for myself in Goodreads. Let me stop and mention before I forget, I'm going to put all of the questions or prompts that I used to make this video today. I'll have that down in the description box below. So if you're a content creator and you would like to do this video on your channel, you'll have all of the questions down in the description box below that you can use, and of course you can make any adjustments to tailor it for you and your channel. So question number 2 I have here: what was the first book you read this year? That was In the Hills Above the Grist Mill by Calvin Ellis, and I am desperately awaiting any mention of book 2. This was such a fun thriller, murder mystery, crime solving. It was about a YouTuber who would come and investigate and just work with locals to try and solve cases. Of course, filming it all for their channel. Question number 3, what was your most anticipated read? It was Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones, but that one got pushed. So second runner up was Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone and say that was also my most disappointing read. I had a lot of people upset with me because I did not like Fairy Tale. It doesn't matter that I like 20 other books I've read by Stephen King. It mattered that I didn't like one. I even recently had someone call me a crap reviewer because I didn't like this book, and I'm thinking, okay, do you want me to lie and not be honest about my opinions? That's not gonna happen. It's my channel, my rules. I'm gonna talk about my reading experience. My job is to just tell you about the elements involved, because even if I don't like it, if I tell you what I don't like, that might be the things that you love, and then I've helped you. I've helped you find a book that you want to read. Question number 4, what was the shortest book you read? The shortest book I read in 2022 was The Tunnel by Joseph Sell, which weighed in at 204 pages. It's the second book in his Liminal series, although you can read it as a standalone. There are brutal murders happening, and people are thinking Jack the Ripper has been reincarnated. So while I started reading it because I wanted to know the identity of this serial killer, I was mesmerized by the character development. Joseph Sell can just write some characters and just get down into their souls and just bear them. Question number 5, what was the longest book that you read? I was really shocked by this one when I looked it up. That was The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, weighed in at 816 pages. I didn't think it was that long. I mean, I loved it. I flew through it. I guess that's why it didn't feel that long to me. Now, I did read a short story collection by Stephen King, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, that was a little bit longer, and I want to say that one weighed in at around 992 pages. So that's my longest short story collection and my longest book. Question number 6, what book surprised you the most? This one was Helicopter Parenting in the Age of Drone Warfare by Patrick Barb. If you are a reader who has content warnings, you're going to want to check out that first before reading this one. I am not going to tell you what they are because they are absolutely huge spoilers for this story, because I did not see that we were going in the direction that we were going. I loved the courage of this author to write this in a different way. Every time this situation happens in real life, it's completely different. It never happens this way. And I've always wondered, why doesn't this happen? And I loved that this author wrote that. Oh, so good. I'll have my written review linked down below if you want to check that out. Question number 7, what was the most disappointing book you read? Other than Fairy Tale, I do have one more, a novella that was disappointing to me, and that was The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. Again, if you loved that book, this is not me knocking on you or me saying you have a bad opinion. It's just my opinion. And just like Stephen King, Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite authors. And I think both of these books, I hold these authors in such high regard. I have such high expectations because these authors, for me, usually exceed my expectations. So I hold them to a higher level of standard. And both of these stories that they came out with this year didn't meet that standard. Both of the stories were just okay for me. I saw wasted potential, in my opinion, in both of those stories. So that's why they were my most disappointing reads. Question number 8. What book exceeded your expectations? This one I chose because I've never read this author before this book. I had no idea how amazing this author was. That's Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I was blown away by this story. This is a book that anybody can read. Everybody should read. It had so many lessons and messages in it. I can't wait to reread it to see what stands out to me next. It was a very violent thriller. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I'm crying. Absolutely amazing. Cannot wait to read more about S.A. Cosby. Question number 9. What author did you read the most of in 2022? That is C.K. McDonald, which he also writes under his full name, Queve McDonald. My friend Ev introduced me to C.K. McDonald's paranormal thriller series called The Stranger Times. Once I read those 2 books, I then started reading his crime thriller series that he writes under the name Queve McDonald, the Dublin Trilogy. While it was different from the paranormal thriller, it was just as amazing and hilarious. And the last book in the Stranger Times series is coming out in a couple of months and I cannot wait. McDonald is a new to me author that I discovered in 2022 and read a ton of books by. The OG author that I've been reading for years that I read the most by otherwise is Stephen King. Question number 10. If you could recommend one book this year to your subscribers, what would it be? So I really want to say 2, but you shouldn't read the second one without reading the first one. And the first one is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It is a nonfiction. It's not self-help. It's what I would call self-improvement. It is an amazing story of this man that is going to make you take a hard look at yourself, but it's going to inspire you to want to be better. It's going to make you want to just rewire your whole way of thinking and how you go about life, whether it's exercise or just life in general, how you act at work. I do recommend the audiobook because after each chapter, the author and the narrator do a sort of podcast where they talk in depth more about it. So good. Number 11, I tried to narrow this one down to my top 3 or top 5, and I couldn't get the number any lower than top 10. And really, it's a little more than 10 books because some of them I couldn't pick just one out of the series. But these are the top favorite covers out of all 185 books that I read this year. We're going to start with, you all know, if you've read this series, one of these was going to show up. The 3rd book in the series is stunning. It'll probably show up on 2023 because I haven't read that one yet. One is A Labyrinth of Scions and Sorcery. It is the 2nd book in Curtis Craddock trilogy, The Risen Kingdom. It is just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to run through these really quickly so I don't take forever, because I will. Next is Joseph Sayles' Prince of the Wasteland. Following that one, I have Wistful Ascending by J.C.M. Byrne. I love these covers. I wanted to read the cover because the guy on the front, Rowan, looks like Uncle Jesse from Full House in space. But the book, the story, backs it up. Absolutely fantastic read. Next, I have The Sadiest by Austrian Spencer. Now, the original cover for this one is amazing. It's stunning, but holy smokes. And it wraps around. I just can't, y'all. I just can't. Next, I have Sue Lynn Tan's Daughter of a Moon Goddess. Love the story, but I had to have it in physical format because that book is amazing. Let's see. This is one of The Awakening Fire by Cassidy Phelan that I got it in the mail. I love the cover. I was intrigued by what was happening, and then I read the little blurb on the front. I was like, I gotta read it. And then one that I really forgot that I read this year. I thought it was all last year. But The Winter of the Witch, which is the third book in Catherine Arden's Winter Night trilogy. I really wanted to reread that series this winter, but I don't think I'm going to have room. Here's another one that I read because of the cover. I actually got the arc from the author, but I asked for it 100% because of the cover. And then I loved the book so much that I had to have the hardback edition. It's not just the hardback, it's the special edition. Sorry, my light's reflecting on it. So I had to have that one. And my last two here are series. I have Stephen Arion's Quest for Heroes duology. Oh my gosh. I got the Broken Binding special editions. They are just absolutely gorgeous. And then the last one here is the David trilogy. I actually read the whole trilogy this year. I think I started around March or April. But these covers are just so beautiful. Like all of them are just gorgeous. Those are my top book covers, my favorite covers of all the books that I read in 2022. There were a lot more that I really loved, but I just had to get it narrowed down. Question number 12. Top favorite new to me authors. These are authors that I discovered in 2022, read my first book by them, not necessarily that they published their first book. And I love the book that I read that I went on to read more by that very same author. One of them you've already heard about, that's C.K. McDonald. David Goggins is another. I read Can't Hurt Me, and then I just recently read his second book, Never Finished. Curtis Craddock, who wrote the first book that I showed in my favorite book covers. I discovered him through the first book in that series, An Alchemy of Mask and Mirrors, immediately followed up with A Science of Labyrinth and Sorcery, and I really thought I was going to finish that trilogy this year, and just things happen. I'm sensing a pattern because the next author also I just showed you S.A. Chakraborty. I read the first book in the David trilogy, The City of Brass. I actually thought I wasn't going to like that series at first, but I was in love with one of the characters, which drove me to read the rest of the series, and I absolutely end up loving it. Another author that almost made it to my top book covers was Luke Arnold. I read all of the books that he has published in the Fetch Phillips archive. It's an urban fantasy series about what happens to a world when magic is drained away. So good. Another is Stephen Arion, which was on my top covers. I read both of the Quest for Heroes, and I already have a spot saved on my 2023 TBR for his new series that he's starting. I want to say the first book, The Judas Blossom, is going to be out in July. Sue Lin Tan, who wrote Daughter of the Moon Goddess, which of course I just showed you. I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess, loved it. The second book, Heart of the Sun Warrior, came out the next month, so I got that. Read it. Not as good as the first one story-wise, but the cover. And then the last author on this list is Nick Martell. I binged back-to-back the Legacy of the Mercenary Kings trilogy. So good. I finished it and immediately wanted to reread it. Question 13. Favorite book of the year. There were so many that came close, but just not enough. I've never stopped thinking about this book ever since I read it. And that is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. I do have big plans to finish that series, or at least finish the books that have been published in 2023. We'll see what happens. We all know bookworms have this issue about shiny new books and then buying books and then wanting to read books and then seeing read-alongs and buddy reads, and you know how it goes. Question 14. Favorite series you read this year but you didn't finish? The Risen Kingdoms by Curtis Craddock. Hands down. This is going to be one of my favorite fantasy series ever. I do believe once I finish the last book. One of my friends, Dia from the channel Novel Idea, messaged me yesterday. She's like, I just finished the last Uncharted Sky. It was so good. Let me know as soon as you read it so we can talk about it. So I'm so excited to see how that one's going to end. Question 15. Favorite new character this year? So I am going to go with more than one. Orca from the Bloodsworn trilogy by John Gwynne. Badass. Favorite female fantasy character ever. Another one is Edelbrock from John Palladino's The Trials of Ashmount. I just cannot let this character alone. Love him. There are times when I walk by that book on my shelf and I pull it out, flip to one of his chapters just to read it and remember him. I'm so excited to see where that character is going to go in the following books. Hopefully the second book in that series, Buzzard's Bowl, is going to be available very soon, or at least the arc. Cannot wait. And then I'm going to go with a sort of animal companion, and that would be Fuji by A.R. Whittam's The Legend of Blackjack. I love Fuji. There are a few rare crocheted Fujis out in the world. I didn't get one. I'm so salty. 16. Favorite new release this year that came out in this year. Did this book come out this year? Hold on, y'all. Let me check myself because I don't know if this book came out in 2022 or before. I think it came out in 2022. All I know is they have another book coming out in April of 2023 that is already on my TBR. Oh, it helps if you look at your read books and not your want to read books. It's like, I know I just read this book. Yes, it came out February 1st, 2022. That is The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. Why is this my favorite new release? It's a literary thriller. I love literary fiction. I love thrillers. You put those two together. I will say it's heavier on the literary themes than it is the thriller, but I still had fun trying to figure out the thriller mystery, and I never did figure it out. I mean, I wanted to lie to y'all and be like, oh, I kind of suspected this part. I didn't. The themes explored here and discussed, I felt I am a better person for having read this book. I cannot wait to reread this book. I loved the characters in this book. I'm highly anticipating the next book Brendan Slocum has out, which is April 2023. Symphony of Secrets, I think, is the title. I don't care what the title is. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read anything Brendan Slocum puts out. Question 17. Favorite reread of the year? No competition for this whatsoever. That is Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. I reread it with the intention to read Seasonal Fears, which is the next book in the Alchemy Journey series. And that one was not as strong of a story as Middle Game was, according to some of my friends. So it's kind of fallen down in priority and I haven't read the second book yet. Question 18. What was the last book you read this year? That is Dreams of Dust by Lily and Crow. Question 19. Favorite series finished this year? I have to go with Joe Abercrombie's The Age of Madness. I finished that trilogy this year. I want to say I read the second and third books this year, and Joe just really ended the First Law world with a bang. I loved that trilogy. It was very, very good. I know a lot of people like it better than the First Law trilogy, but me, I love them both in different ways. The First Law trilogy is where I met some of these characters that later brought us characters in The Age of Madness. So I love Joe Abercrombie. I will probably read everything he writes and love everything. But the First Law, those characters is where I fell in love with the world and the author. And you just never forget your first love. Question 20. Favorite short story this year? I have to go with one that I was going to skip in a collection that I was reading. That's Carmen Maria Machado's Especially Heinous. I thought this woman went through and wrote the synopsis of all the Law & Order SVU unit episodes. I've never watched that show. I know who the main characters are, but I've never watched that show. And I'm like, I'm not going to want to read this. But I said, you know what? Give it 10 pages. And then I was reading the whole thing. It's actually kind of more closer to a novella. I loved it. It is told in synopsis format of episodes, but you can see the thread of a story that connects all of them, and it was really good. Question 21. Favorite short story collection? I do have a new favorite short story collection as far as manga, and that is The Liminal Zone by Gigi Ito. That one came out this year, and it knocked his other collection that I loved, Frankenstein, down a peg to number 2, firmly seating itself in the number 1 slot. Outside of manga, favorite short story collections, I have 2. I couldn't pick between the 2. One is Corpse Honey by Michael J. Pico, and the other is Tribulations by Richard Thomas. And then question number 22. Yes, I did 22 questions for 2022. This one is playing off the earlier one where I showed you my top favorite book covers of the year, What was my least favorite book cover of the year? That's gonna be Catherine Lacey's Pew. It's not that it's ugly, it's just not striking. There's nothing about it. I don't understand what it has to do with the story at all. Well, I kind of do. But the book itself, the story itself, it's literary fiction, absolutely amazing. Love the premise of it. It was very interesting. It was very thought-provoking, and also one that's going to make you look at yourself and how you treat people. Basically, quit relying on your eyes to tell you something about a person. Get to know that person's soul. So that's going to do it. Those are 22 questions about all the things that I read in 2022. I hope you enjoyed this look back at my year of reading. I'm very excited to see what I'm going to discover in 2023. And yes, I will be doing 23 questions for year 2023. Thank you all so much for watching and spending your time with me today. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.